Hey guys, Raiden here, and welcome to my best and worst games of 2017 to 2018-ish. In the past year-ish. Why did I make this video? Because at the end of the day, whether I dislike something or love it, video games are great and I just want to share things I like with you guys. However, games on this list don't have to have been released within the past year. They could be an Atari game for all I care, but I don't actually like the Atari, so there will be none of those on here. Note that all of these games showed up outside of the channel, so as much as I want to rant about Shadows of Valentia's mistakes, or praise the character and world building of Berseria, I will have to leave those for another time. Now I have to state the obvious before we begin that this whole video is just my opinion, and my opinion is usually shit according to the minority of the comment section, but it's my opinion nonetheless. Just because I don't like something doesn't invalidate your love for it. I'm sure someone even loves Bubsy. Probably? No. No one loves Bubsy. This is just a quick disclaimer that Fire Emblem fans are probably gonna be very upset with me after this video. Let's just start with the bad so we can get to the good. First up, my 3 most disappointing games of the past year that I haven't played on the channel, and if you're wondering why there's only 3, it's because not that many things disappointed me in the past year. I was relatively surprised and enamored with the good games that came out in the past year. Number 3. Unlike the other 2 games on this list, number 3 actually makes me upset for almost every single reason. Fire Emblem Warriors. Now, I have to state that I'm not a big Warriors fan in the first place. I'm not really attracted to the gameplay, and when its style is adapted to something I like, well, it usually ends up being a little rushed. There are a few really good ones out there, like Hyrule Warriors and Dragon Quest Warriors, but I can't say I'm a huge Zelda fan, and I've only played Dragon Quest VIII, which I did love. Although admittedly I wasn't very excited for Fire Emblem Warriors, I was hoping this would be the first game to get me to play a Warriors game for more than 2 hours. Fire Emblem Warriors is really not good, but good at the same time. Ever notice how the abbreviation for this game is few? Well, that's ironically correct because there are only a few characters on the roster I actually give a damn about or I find to be interesting picks. Of course, I understand that you'd want to represent the 3 most popular and recent Fire Emblem games that release, and I also understand that this decision was probably made by some guy in a suit that looked at a chart. But seriously, 70% of your roster are characters from Awakening and Fates? If you add the god-awful plastic banana-haired interesting as Crom lords that are the game's OC lords, that means slightly less than 80% of the roster is taken up by 2 games, and that's not even counting characters who are just reskins. Look at Final Fantasy spin-offs. Sure, Noctis and Cloud get a bit more than everyone else, but every game is represented equally. Even the spin-offs like Final Fantasy Tactics are represented in the other spin-off games. The 30-year lineage of Final Fantasy shows in everything they do, and they make sure to give it a point that all of its players from all generations are not forgotten. But with Fire Emblem, that can almost never happen. You had to alienate fans that have played these games for almost 3 decades to make sure you could add bipolar purple Camus and Garen's incestuous ballistic missiles. Disclaimer here is that I actually like both Fates and Awakening, but I'm just tired of them being front-loaded onto everything that Fire Emblem releases. Oh, and it doesn't end there. Niles and Odin / Owain, who both show up in the game, are on the disc and relegated to DLC characters. Seriously, there are cutscenes in which you are talking to them and you can see their models. Even worse, they play nearly identically to other characters who already exist. The majority of the cast is made up of 3 games: Fates, Awakening, and Shadow Dragon. Guess what 3 games the only 3 DLC packs are based off of? That's right, Fates, Awakening, and Shadow Dragon. It sucks too because this is one of the more enjoyable Warriors games I played. The UI design is simple and I can actually tell what's happening on the map. Usually as Lu Bu, I lose track of the mountain of corpses I've created due to not understanding what's actually happening on the map, but here I have a pretty good idea of what's going on. You can issue strategic orders to keep up that Fire Emblem feeling, along with real stat growth and equipment. They really tried to emulate the Fire Emblem style and they did it very well. Although I still don't like the Warriors format due to the overall lack of challenge and the combo system being so ridiculously simple that it makes a baby look like he knows how to do a pretzel motion since leaving the womb. My largest disappointment is that we'll never get to see a 3D model GBA Armor Knight crit. Number 2 of my most disappointing games of the past year, or that I played in the past year, DMC. Just to be clear, we're talking about the quote-unquote prequel game made by Ninja Theory. So a lot of you guys know I'm a huge Devil May Cry fan. I even did a poor quality Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition series, and I did a Devil May Cry overview that is very incorrect, and I don't recommend watching. I remember when DMC came out, I was so excited there was a new Devil May Cry game. I got through about half of it and quit due to being so upset with it. I recently went back and played DMC through and through with the Virgil DLC, and I can honestly say it's a decent game, but an awful Devil May Cry game, and it honestly besmirches everything that Devil May Cry has done and tried to accomplish over the years. Let's just start with Dante alone. I actually don't mind Dante's new design. Sure, he looked a little young and rowdy compared to the semi-mature, wisecracking Dante I knew, but I was willing to give him a chance. I remember in an interview with the director of the game, he stated that they were trying to appeal to a newer and younger audience. Oh, I get it, so let's give him writing that an 11-year-old who just said his first naughty word would find funny. So instead of scenes like this...
You sure know how to throw a party. No food, no drinks, and the only babe just left.
My sincerest apology, brother. I was so eager to see you, I couldn't concentrate on preparations for the bash.
We get scenes like this.
You don't look a day over 12,000.
Fuck you!
Fuck you!
Fuck you!
Also, where did all the stylish cutscenes from the past games go? There was almost no attempt to even incorporate the sense of flair that exists within games like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta. Although it did have some good moments of Dante and Virgil acting like teenage brothers rather than the distant ones we see in Devil May Cry 3, the heel turn of Virgil becoming evil is the stupidest thing I have ever seen. Scratch that, this is the most stupid and unlikable version of Virgil I have ever seen. The thing is that Devil May Cry 3 left Virgil's motives vague enough so that you can kinda sympathize with him. I could always kinda get why he did the things that he did, but you mean to tell me that that hyper-intelligent Virgil, after killing the villain, takes up that villain's exact plan expecting it to go better? Oh hey Dante, I forgot to tell you that we're going to become a powerful hyper-corrupt organization that's going to control humans after defeating the powerful hyper-corrupt organization that's controlling the humans. You also mean to tell me that Virgil, the most calm and collected character in the Devil May Cry series, who does everything very methodically, is so irredeemable that he shoots a pregnant woman with a gun and then smiles about it? I have no idea what they were thinking when they wrote Virgil, but he came off as a sociopathic child at best. Okay, let's just get back on track here. The gameplay was almost perfect. You almost had it. It was a very easy to get into combo system that had depth if you were looking for it. Next to DMC 4, this is probably one of the most smooth combat systems in the series. I know veterans like to point at Devil May Cry 3 a lot as the pinnacle of the series. I do this too, but admittedly the controls and camera angles can get wonky at times. But you can't color code enemies in a Devil May Cry game. That works in any other type of game, just not this one. In DMC, you have two types of weapons. You have 3 demon weapons and 2 angel weapons. The distinction is that all demon weapons are pretty damn slow and hurt red enemies, and all angel weapons are extremely fast and hurt blue enemies. If you hit a red enemy with an angel weapon, you bounce off of it like a 9-year-old in a Game Boy Color. The point of Devil May Cry is to do stylish combos with all the tools you have. By limiting those tools, you're limiting the amount of variety and fun a player has access to. In Devil May Cry 4, once you're good enough, you could practically get any non-boss enemy into the air and combo them as you please without limiting the moveset. On top of this, the game hands out SS ranks like candy. They're so easy to get for a veteran player, it's quite ridiculous. Especially if you're using the angel weapons due to how many hits they provide, SS ranks are easier to get than ever before, and SSS ranks are hardly a challenge. Also, why are there only 2 angel weapons but 3 demon weapons? Did they not have enough time to fit in 3 of each? Oh yeah, and in Virgil's DLC, they introduce an enemy that slaps Virgil 5 feet across the room every time he tries to teleport, when his #1 ability to avoid taking damage is teleportation. Game design. Number 1 of my most disappointing games of the year. I really didn't want this to be on the list. It's not disappointing because it has bad writing or has terrible business practices. It's just mediocre compared to the original, and that hurts the most. Bravely Default is one of my favorite 3DS titles to date, being a wonderful homage to classic Final Fantasy games mixed with some of the quirky writing you find among the Ace Attorney series. Bravely Default's sequel, Bravely Second, was released some time ago, but I didn't have the time to sit down and play it, so it's been sitting on the shelf for quite a while. This last year, I picked it up and played it, and sad to say, I wasn't very impressed. The largest gripe I have with the game is its characters, which is weird because the characters were my favorite part of the first game. Your party is made up of 4 people. Tiz, Adia, Magnolia, and you. You, get it? Because it's a pun, because you the player, but it's spelled Y-E-W. Clever. You is basically a member of the 3 Musketeers, and Magnolia is a French-speaking ball-buster from the moon. Yes, they named the game Super Boss's Balls just so they could make that pun. The problem is not with them. While you may be bland, at least his character developed. Due to Tiz and Adia being main characters in the first Bravely Default, they don't really get much development. I thought they were going to play a mentor role for you and Magnolia, but in the end they were just kind of there. The other 2 party members from the first game, Anyez and Ringabel, are even less involved than Tiz and Adia. Anyez gets kidnapped right at the start of the game, so she doesn't do anything but play Navi through an orb in your inventory, and Ringabel I can't talk about because major spoilers for the first and second game. This was sad because it feels like 2 wasted character slots for potentially more interesting characters. But instead, we just got party members from the first game that really don't do much. Another big gripe I have is the immense asset reuse in this game. Sure, there are quite a few new dungeons and new towns, but for the most part it's the world from the first game. Normally, this wouldn't be so bad, but remember, it's original Bravely Default we're talking about here. And what was the worst part of Bravely Default? Getting the true ending. To get the true ending in the first Bravely game, you had to fight the same 4 #totally not Final Fantasy primals 5 times. Having to travel to each one of them every time and hearing the same dialogue every time, this is probably the part of the game in which most people just straight up quit. Because I spent so much time in the world of Bravely Default, I was hoping to see a new set of continents. And I was sadly disappointed. The last issue I had was with the new asterisk system. Remember when I spent a good amount of time complaining about Shadows of Valentia's lack of customization despite every Fire Emblem fan getting hyped up over the quote-unquote variable class progression? Well, in Final Fantasy Tactics and Bravely Default you get variable classes. You get these by defeating special bosses called asterisk holders. Every character can be every class, and you can mix elements from multiple classes to make some pretty fun combinations. There are a ton of new classes, and each of them were a lot of fun to play around with. Some classes made potions, some wield 3 weapons, making it so they can attack over 60 times a turn. My favorite class, which I don't want to name because it's a spoiler, can actually turn back time to a previous state. Some of the buffs you were wearing wear off? Turn back time. Is your character suffering from extreme amounts of status ailments? Turn back time. Want to go back to the turn in which you had full health? Turn back time. Wish you made better life choices? Sorry. Too deep? This part may be a little confusing, but stay with me. Every time you go to fight an asterisk holder in order to get a new class, the 2 of them are actually in a disagreement. The game mechanic is for you, the player, to choose between a moral gray circumstance. Say giving orphans food now, or fueling the economy for greater prosperity later. The person you disagree with, you have to fight a boss battle with and gain their class. The problem with this system is that the class combinations are the peanut butter of the gameplay. So what you're actually doing when the decision comes along is you pick the one that allows you to put Magnolia in a cute chef outfit. Aside from these things, I'd still say that the game is pretty darn good. The art is amazing, done by my favorite artist, Akihiko Yoshida, responsible for art in games such as Final Fantasy Tactics and Vagrant Story. The soundtrack, much like the first game, is still orgasmically good despite having a different composer. The Kaiser's theme is one of my favorite tracks, and I listen to it on a monthly basis. The gameplay itself, while largely the same, is just as fun as the original. If you're a fan of Final Fantasy or any older RPGs, I would really recommend giving Bravely Default a try. As for the sequel, Bravely Second, well, that's up to you to decide. So now that we're out of the realm of disappointments, I want to talk about 6 games from the past year that I really enjoyed. Number 6. I've tried to get into quite a few Harvest Moon games, but quite a few of them are a bit too slow for me. I know what you're thinking, it's a game about farming and finding love. What did you expect? I didn't expect the game to be action-packed or exactly filled with a ton of fun, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was that I hated so much until I played Rune Factory 4. Rune Factory is a spin-off of the Harvest Moon series with a more anime art style and a combat system. When I first turned on Rune Factory, I instantly realized why I had such a problem with the Harvest Moon games. With some Harvest Moon games, you can choose where your home is, and sometimes the home you want is a ludicrous distance from the main town where everyone's at, where all the fun is. And I play these games to have fun. In Rune Factory, The word that fixes everything that Harvest Moon did wrong is convenience. Everything is within a convenient range of your home, which is at the center of town. You even have your garden outside of your home and the box in which you ship produce in. You can even tame monsters that you find out in the fields to assist you in the daily watering and planting of your crops. You have menus that explain everything quite clearly, and a gigantic inventory. All furniture in the game you can place right where you want, allowing you to store everything neat and tidy in a very small space. On top of all of this, the day never seems slow with a myriad of things to do and people to talk to. It's like an RPG, and you have a skill for everything. Go and learn how to fish, work on your farm, run your own shop, mingle with the villagers, participate in town events, lose at town events, lose town events and fail to impress the person you've been trying to impress for the past year. Or you can help out with people in the request box, or even continue the story, as this game has an actual quest line. The combat isn't really anything special, but I think it's a bit better than I expected it to be with the inclusion of weapon types and magic. I do have a few complaints, though. First off, the marriage system is kind of weird. I played for 3 in-game years total, waiting for a marriage event to happen that just kind of randomly happens, I guess, eventually, probably. It never did for me, despite being the most important person in that person's life. The only other one is that the characters are a little tropey at times. I swear I've seen all these characters elsewhere before. Of course, that didn't stop me from spending every day with wannabe Saberfort trying to figure out why the hell I can't make her favorite cake when I baked her an ocean worth of chocolate chip cookies. Just look at me, not your brother, me. I'm the one working, your brother just sits around and reads like a nerd. I'm a successful multi-millionaire potato farmer. I can buy your love with money. Or potatoes. Number 5. Horror is a genre I almost never have the courage to dive into. I much prefer the shallower depths of survival horror. And to be honest, I haven't really found any survival horror game that has captured my will to finish it since Silent Hill 3. And if we're talking about the action survival horror genre, that would be Dead Space 2. Luckily, Evil Within 2 went beyond my expectations. Evil Within 2 is a continuation of the first game's story that I can't talk much about with spoiling the entirety of the first game. In the most vague and simplified explanation ever, Evil Within 2 is about ex-detective man Sebastian Castellano searching for his lost family member. The most important thing about this game is that it's scary in the right way. This game is just so great at showcasing as to why I love the older Silent Hill games. I don't need a Five Nights at Freddy's or Slender jump scare hitting me every couple minutes when I can have breathtaking moments like this. Moments like these are why I find survival horror much more scary and interesting than regular horror games. The idea of having a resource which can run out just when I need it really adds something to the game. I hate the modern trend of first-person games loaded with jump scares where you can't fight back. It might as well just be a movie at that point to me. If I had to describe how the game plays, I would say it feels like a modern-day Resident Evil 4 with the atmosphere of Silent Hill, which is a dream combination that I've always wanted. The stiff gameplay systems and plethora of bugs that plagued the first game have been completely taken care of. Everything feels smooth as butter. This is one of the few survival horror games in recent times where at the beginning you're actually helpless, while later on you'll be flying across the screen to slam dunk, knife, kill unaware enemies. Seriously, that move is amazing. Early in the game, you're a piece of paper. The Agony crossbow from the first game returns and provides lots of new ways to approach combat. From freeze bolts to shock bolts to incendiary rounds, it's all there. As well as having a rewarding upgrade system that rewards you for exploring the game's new open world. I was a little worried when I heard that this horror game was an open world, but the actual levels are sectioned off in little parts of their own, and the map itself has lots of secrets to be discovered. One suggestion I'll leave you with is to play the game on the hardest difficulty. It really adds to the experience. If you're a fan of any survival horror franchise and haven't played Evil Within 2, I'd highly recommend picking it up right now. Also, the main villain, Stefanos, is rad. Number 4. So after hearing the first few entries, you may be thinking, Xeno, I don't have money for this. I spent it all on Correcchio wallpaper for my whole house so I never have to leave his wonderful gaze. Well, your financial plight reminded me that I haven't talked about a mobile game yet. It's not very often a mobile game catches me in any way, even if they're themed after something I like. I would love Fate Grand Order as a huge fan of the Fate series, but after playing it for a year and not getting a single 5-star due to the game's 1% drop rate, I quit. I would play Fire Emblem Heroes, being a huge Fire Emblem fan, if its gameplay wasn't only as exciting as checkers and possible lore-expanding dialogue wasn't wasted on player flattery. I would play Hearthstone due to my love of card games, but quite frankly, I don't care for the Warcraft art style. So what game does all these things right? Shadowverse. I've counted hours, and next to Monster Hunter, I've played Shadowverse more than any other game in the past year. Shadowverse is a collectible card game with AAA art and unique game mechanics that just keep bringing me back. Oh, where do I even start with this? I suppose let's look at the gameplay. Shadowverse works kind of like Hearthstone, which I'll be using for comparison a lot in this video, mainly because I haven't really played any other online card games. In Shadowverse, you pick one of the 8 unique classes and build a custom deck to your liking, and then go and complete the story mode.
The girl is not alone, but her compatriots are nowhere in sight.
Hello there. I'm on an adventure. Do you want to be part of it? You can be the person who gets killed.
Or you can go online and compete against other players. The variety in gameplay is what keeps me coming back to this game. For example, Forestcraft is a deck type that focuses on using card effects to put low-cost fairy cards into your hands. This synergizes with cards that become more powerful when you play a certain number of cards in a turn, turning said low-cost fairies into tribute to summon some very powerful entities. There's also Bloodcraft, which uses your cards to lower your own health. Once your health goes below 10, you activate a Vengeance effect, allowing cards with a Vengeance attribute to become immensely more powerful. To go even further than that, there's a multitude of ways to play every class. For example, the Runecraft class is focused on using spells that boost other spells' powers. But if you want, you could build the deck to center around golems that require earth sigils to become more effective. The sheer amount of variety and creativity is what just keeps me coming back to this game every time, as well as the fact that it's both on mobile and on Steam. This is one of the most free-to-play card games I have ever seen, let alone one of the most free-to-play mobile games I've ever seen. Those of you whom have played Hearthstone know how difficult it can be when you're trying to get just one more card pack. Shadowverse hands its cards out like candy, with a ton of different challenges and modes to keep you coming back, as well as new card expansions that often just give you dozens of card packs. It never feels like I'm stuck grinding and can't achieve anything. This may be a con for some people, but honestly, I think that the art in this game is amazing. Every time I see some list of pros and cons of the game, one of the cons is always its anime art style. Maybe I've fallen too far into the trash pit, but the card art in this game is so well done, and it's done by so many different people in so many different styles, there's a lot to look at. From the adorable maids holding guns to the hulking behemoths, you got your dragon ladies and your skeletal husbandos, all the way to whatever I'm looking at right now. Each card is fully voiced, and quite well, I'd say. The goofy squeals and yells from Hearthstone became hard on my ears after a while, yet Shadowverse cards never seem to. If this sounded interesting enough to get you to download Shadowverse from the App Store or Steam, then I highly recommend checking out a Shadowverse YouTuber by the name of Ignitius. Ignitius has a full beginner's guide that covers things from basic game mechanics to the strategy behind deck construction to an overview of how every class plays. In short, Shadowverse is the first mobile game in which I can actually say I'm having fun with it. Most mobile games feel like a never-ending grind, or it can feel like I just log in to pull a character and then wait till the next time they give me free summoning currency. Cygames, you made a damn good card game. Number 3. It's really hard for indie titles to impress me. I normally ignore all of them, if not for an interesting enough premise. Transistor was the last indie game I played that I could actually call truly unique. By the way, if you haven't played Transistor, that game is absolutely amazing, and one of my favorite games just ever. Funnily enough, I'm not really into visual novels either, despite almost half the series on this channel being said visual novels. The only times I pick them up is when they aren't pure, as in they have some aspect of gameplay like Ace Attorney and Danganronpa. One day I was browsing the Steam store and came across a game called Valhalla, Cyberpunk Bartender Action. Yes, that's the full title. In Valhalla, you play as Jill, a bartender at Valhalla dystopian downtown bar. During the day, several characters will come in and order drinks and have conversations with Jill. The challenge is remembering the drinks they ordered and making sure you prepare it correctly. Preparing a drink incorrectly will dock some of Jill's pay, which is very important because by the end of the game, if Jill doesn't have enough money, she gets kicked out of her apartment. Poor Jill. But bartending gameplay is only a very small part of the game. The meat of the game is interacting with the few dozen returning patrons that come in and out of the bar on a daily basis. Through talking to them, you learn about their character, the world, and interpersonal relationships they have with some of the other characters. The ability to interact with these characters is the game's #1 joy, and I was never bored of it for a second. Awesome characters like the kind police officer Say, to the jubilant multi-purpose robot Dorothy, to Rad Sheba. I'm not joking, his name is just Rad Sheba. He's rad. This is all accompanied by an amazingly relaxing soundtrack that I to this day play at gatherings. Just kidding, I don't have any friends. Up until now, I've only played visual novels that appeal to me because they have crazy mind-bending endings. But Valhalla was the first visual novel to truly show me that you don't even need to have a real ending to your game. As long as the journey was enjoyable, who cares? If you're into any sort of light novel or visual novel, I highly recommend Valhalla. I was baffled at the variety of emotions I had when playing this game. There are so many moments that make you laugh, cry, or just stare at the screen, yelling why. Number 2. Okay, so this is one of the more evident entries on here. I've had problems writing this part of the video because there's just too much to cover and too much to say. As someone who played the original Nier Gestalt and was not impressed but intrigued by its world, when I heard that the Nier series was going to be handed to my favorite game developers, Platinum Games, who are responsible for some of the most iconic modern character action games, I was hyped to no end. I knew this game would be something special, especially with Yoko Taro still at the helm. The game I'm talking about, of course, is Nier Automata. I actually started a Let's Play of Nier Automata, but due to extremely low viewership, it was cancelled on episode 3, despite my interest and enjoyment of it. But in my own time, I finished the game and I can honestly say both Yoko Taro and Platinum Games live up to their names, even so far as to say they outdid themselves. Nier Automata is about the two androids, 2B and 9S, who are part of an organization called Yorha, who are at war with the machines. I can't really get any more into the story than that due to most of it being spoilers, but I can talk about all the amazing things this game does. First off, the gameplay. It feels a lot like Bayonetta for those of you who have played it. Every move is fluid and stylishly satisfying, switching between two weapons and a floating gun called a pod. Yes, I know pods are more than just floating guns, but I'm trying to keep the video simple. Returning from Nier Gestalt, the wonderful perspective changes are still there and better than ever. I was surprised how intuitively the game played, switching from over the shoulder to top down to side scroller. Between all of this, you have RPG mechanics such as installing chips into 2B's rather large posterior to add different combat effects. I was pleasantly surprised at how well Platinum handled RPG mechanics, seeing as how this is the very first RPG they've ever worked on to my knowledge. The original Nier Gestalt had what I would say is one of the best soundtracks of all time. Nier Automata is no different, with tracks that pumped me up and gave me feels during fast-paced boss fights, an OST that chilled me down to the core, to the point of putting down the controller and taking a long break. After finishing the game, I immediately ordered this phenomenal soundtrack and have listened to it weekly since. With all of this going for it, the story of this game is non-arguably the most important part. Well, once again, I can't go into what the story is about. You can check out my buddy Clems's channel, who has done in-depth analysis on every game in the Nier and Drakengard universe. Seriously, I don't know how this man doesn't have 200,000 subscribers, because he deserves it more than anyone else I can think of on this whole platform. In the end, Nier Automata is a gripping tale of human existentialism, perspective, and loss. And if at no point during this game do you feel any emotional reaction, perhaps you're the heartless machine after all. Hey guys, welcome to my rapid fire round where I talk about a bunch of games I loved this year but I can't really recommend for one reason or another. First is Monster Hunter World, which is a game I put over 100 hours into. I would recommend to almost anyone who's a fan of the action genre in general, or character action genre, or just likes grinding for loot. But the only reason it's not on the list is because there's most definitely going to be another version, and if you can't afford a PS4 or Xbox One or a decent enough PC, there's always Monster Hunter Gen, or Cross being ported to the Switch. I actually don't remember what they renamed it, but there's a new Switch Monster Hunter coming soon, which I'll be sure to pick up. There are also a lot of really good AAA titles this year that came out, like the new God of War, which is actually surprisingly decent, Horizon Zero Dawn, and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And although I didn't really enjoy Breath of the Wild that much, as I'm not a huge Zelda fan in general, I will say I enjoyed it more than most Zelda games. Probably just because of the fact that I'm not stuck using the same weapon the whole game. There's another game I have a love-hate relationship with, and that's Fire Emblem 4. Fire Emblem 4 is actually only in Japanese, so if you're going to download it, you'll need a translation patch, but if you're a Fire Emblem fan, I'd recommend giving it a shot. Well, the gameplay is boring and arduous, and a lot of it is just moving around a gigantic map. Fire Emblem 4 has a unique style of storytelling, in which all the storytelling happens on a singular big map. This game really makes me want a remake of it, an Echoes, you could say, or at the very least, it makes me hope that FE16 is more politically focused, as that writing is almost always more interesting than a 16-year-old talking about their ideological plights. I get the question every once in a while that, Xeno, do you hate Western games? And the answer is no, I don't in any way, but my favorite genre is the RPG genre, and all the games I've been looking forward to in the past few years have been complete flops in my opinion. Except for two. I would also recommend Divinity Original Sin 2, as it's the best Western RPG I've played since The Witcher 3. It's a true pen and paper experience, turned into a video game, but I don't recommend it for the same reason of Monster Hunter, as there's going to be another better version with more content coming later this year. Along the lines of that, there's also Pillars of Eternity 2, which I'm currently loving as my favorite CRPG of all time at the moment, since I came a little late for Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2. As for animated series that I particularly enjoyed this year, I would highly recommend watching Made in Abyss, as that show is masterful at what it does. From the direction, to the sound, to the animation, to just the little things the characters do, is also entertaining. And it's also a very gripping tale. If you're gonna watch that show, I recommend preparing for a wild ride, but it's one of my most recommended of this past year. Also, Legend of the Galactic Heroes got a remake, which is apparently a fantastic space opera symphony, or whatever you want to call it, and I'm actually enjoying the new remake, although according to many fans, it does not live up to the 60 to 100 episode series that was the original. I highly recommend watching what is probably my favorite of the current season, Megalobox. Megalobox is an anime about a guy who boxes with robot arms, and that's all you need to know. This is a show that from episode 1 I could tell was going to be an absolute classic, next to things like Cowboy Bebop and Trigun. And yes, I'm giving it that high of praise because I believe in it to that extent. Anyways, now that I'm done spewing random recommendations, on to my #1 game of the past year-ish. Seriously, I don't have a coherent timeline on this. Let's go! Back in my younger years, I remember receiving a gift card from my local games retailer. After returning from the store, disappointed that they didn't have anything that I found interesting, I looked on their website. After scrolling through all of these games, I saw one that was both cheap and caught my eye. That was the digital download for Persona 3 FES. I figured that it looked cool enough, so why not purchase it? Maybe 5 hours in, I realized that I was hooked. I could not get enough of the music, the gameplay loop, the immense amount of dialogue and character interaction. It was all so perfect to me, and I had never played anything like it. After finishing Persona 3, I was sad to hear that the first two were nothing like it, and went on for a year without any more exposure to the series whatsoever. One day at a local mom and pop type shop, something caught my eye, and I couldn't believe it existed. Persona 4 had eluded me for almost a year, and the moment I saw it, I begged my parents for it, despite its expensive price. I was basically running around my house yelling at the game for at least 3 minutes before putting it in. I love Persona 4 from beginning to end, as in my opinion, one of the best RPGs ever made. After finishing Persona 4 twice, I wondered how they could even release a game up to par with it. I waited and waited and waited through the spin-offs and the dancing and the surprisingly really good fighting game, but finally, Persona 5 released. While writing this, I kept trying to think of a negative aspect. I kept trying to find something wrong with Persona 5. Only a few minor details stood out as a negative. Persona 5 is my favorite game of the past few years, most likely. For those of you unfamiliar with the Persona series, every story is different, but they all have one thing in common. The game is half dungeon crawling RPG and half dating/life simulator. In the Persona games, you play as a semi-self-insert high school student living a normal life when they gain the power of Personas, and start fighting against a social plight. Your daily activities are up to you, whether you want to hang out with one of the 20 social links you have. Social links, by the way, are a level that goes up when you increase your understanding of another individual by hanging out with them. And these social links affect your strength during the dungeon crawling sections of the game, meaning that over the 100+ hours you'll be playing this game, you'll have the chance to hang out with a lot of characters. some whom are in your party and some who aren't. It's not that simple though, as there are many other things you can spend your in-game days doing, such as increasing life skills, working at a part-time job to earn money, shopping, decorating your room. This game is so much to do, it can feel overwhelming when you start out. Or you can spend daytime in the dungeons grinding out levels in the game's fantastically designed dungeons and getting new personas which are much like Shin Megami Tensei demons, or as I like to call them, actually cool Pokemon. I'm really sorry, Pokemon fans, but you lost me when you turned a lamp into a Pokemon. I've always loved personas and demons because they're always based off of some piece of folklore, religion, or historical figures. The amount of detail in every single persona is absolutely nuts and makes me excited for Shin Megami Tensei 5 to release on the Switch. The largest thing that instantly stood out to me are the visuals in this game. The menus are just porn for the eyes. The post-battle reward screen is one of the best battle-to-map transitions I've ever seen in an RPG. Maybe a game in general. The character designs and location design are phenomenal and completely immersive. When I play this game, it feels like I'm actually there at times. Persona fusing is more reasonable and perfect than ever before. The difficulty, while not as harsh as many other mainline Shin Megami Tensei games, is still there. I played the game on a harder difficulty and still had a hell of a fun time with a decent challenge. This cast is one of the most entertaining in the entire Persona series. I loved every single character, maybe except Ann, but that's just due to her social link being about a thing I don't have any particular interest in. The writing in this game is so great and holds up among the many twists and turns the game has to offer. Can I talk about how Futaba is probably my favorite character in all of Persona now? Maybe one of my favorite characters in just video games. Seriously, Futaba's story arc and social link hit me in such a personal place that I curled up in a ball and just sat there for an hour. Futaba is a character who I can relate to so well that I felt physically uncomfortable playing some of her story bits and almost burst into tears at some points. In short, without spoiling anything, I would say that the villains in this game aren't quite as good as the others, but definitely serviceable. I sadly don't have time to sit here and explain to you every single reason as to why Persona 5 is my game of the year. Every single aspect of the game has so much attention and animation put into it, it's almost breathtaking just moving around the world. Persona 5 is what I would call a near-perfect RPG. Hope you enjoyed my best and worst games of the last year. Please leave a like if you enjoyed it. I normally don't make many videos like this because they take so much time, and as a highly edited Let's Play channel, I don't have that much time as is. But it's always fun to talk about the things I love. Also, if you want, you can check out my channel and see if any of our current series interests you. Have a wonderful day. Raiden out.